Hi, Dennis.
Hi, Marissa.
So it's been almost 2 months since we did this.
Uh-huh.
And I just want to start by saying thank you from all of us. There are many people who are watching you and praying for you. And we are just so proud of you. It's a lot of work that you're putting into getting better, speaking, keeping up to date with everything that is happening in the world, advising me, advising your family, advising people who come and visit you. And it doesn't go unnoticed. And we really appreciate it. And we just thank God that you're with us and that your wisdom is still here, and for the opportunity for me and us to sit together and learn from you. So thank you, Dennis, for putting in the effort.
Well, that's really beautiful. Thank you all for schlepping out here, cross country, and coming to my hospital room. So let me give everybody an update, because I really believe, as I did before, in transparency. So I remain paralyzed, but the biggest work, in fact, virtually all the work that has been done has been to enable me to breathe better, because the nerves to my diaphragm have been severely injured. In fact, a number of doctors, independently of one another, have described the fact that I am talking as, quote, a miracle. And these are not religious people. I am cognizant of how lucky I am to be able to speak, no brain damage. My inability to remember names long precedes my fall.
This is true.
In fact, as I mentioned to you in our last dialogue, everything I wrote in my happiness book has been realized. I wrote, among many other things, life is a tragedy as well as a glory, that gratitude is everything. Gratitude has been a large measure of what has sustained me. I am so grateful for all this long life prior to my accident. And why would that leave? Because I had this terrible fall? Why would the gratitude be shattered? Do all those years not count? Everybody has to ask that question. What about all the good years I've had? People who have terrible things happen go, why me? But they don't go, why me, when great things happen? Why me have good health, have a good marriage, and good friends? So I'll tell you, if nothing else, people should read my happiness book. Happiness is a serious problem. And I am very grateful that I have a nature that has, as Dr. Stephen Weimar put it in an interview, what did he say? Oh yeah, I have great shock absorbers. So that's an interview all unto itself.
So Dennis, you gave us an update on how you're doing.
Right.
How do you think America is doing right now?
This bothers me even more than my own condition. I've been very worried for decades, and what I had not anticipated until a few years ago, and it was, when did I write the column, America First, but not America Only? And it's too many of the leading intellectuals on the right have gone to America only. And that's, I don't understand how they justify that if they are religious people. One of the dominant themes of the Bible is do not stand blood. Do not stand by on the blood of your neighbor. Let me translate it literally. Al tamo, do not stand. Al dam reach, on the blood of your neighbor. There it is. In other words, you can't adopt the attitude, me only. One of the 5 most famous dictums in all of Jewish teaching. If I am not for me, then who will be for me? But if I am only for me, what am I? That's how America and Americans should think. Yes, we are first for America, just as we are first for our family. There are a number of firsts, but anyone who is only for their family or only for America is not a moral person. God or man or luck or hard work has made America the strongest country in the world, economically, militarily, culturally. And those who believe God was involved should certainly believe that God wants us to use it for the good of mankind, not just for America. And now we have voices that are saying, just for America. And I don't know how they just justify it if they are religious people.
Well, I think some of them may not be religious people, and some of them might be religious people, but people are very angry, Dennis. They feel that the government has failed them. The U.S. government has cared more about other countries around the world than about them. There is a term that has been used, disaffected men. These men feel like everything has been stacked against them. They have been called all kinds of names. They were toxic masculinity. They should speak last because they are no victim. They should pay the price of what has been done to others before they were born. We know how these young boys were treated in classrooms, oftentimes drugged and punished because they behave like boys. They also feel like they don't have economic opportunity, and their jobs are being given to foreigners, and so they're very, very angry. And when they see that the government is caring about other countries and other governments and other people, and they don't care about them, they feel mad and disaffected.
Well, this shows how pernicious dependence on government is as a doctrine, not just in reality. The first thought is, what is the government doing for me? This was not the way America was founded. The government is there to protect you from enemies and engage in absolutely necessary, like the interstate highway. Can't be built state by state. It's an interstate project. But this notion that, what was the statement of the new mayor of New York City? He said, no problem is too big for the government to solve or too small for the government to get involved in. In other words, everything. And this has been bought by a whole younger generation. What will the government do for me? Women have already been affected by this. notion, what will the government do for me? So I don't really need a man. That's the first question of this generation raised by leftist teachers is, what will the government do for me? So the very proposition that your question was based on is flawed. What will you do for you? Not what will the state do for you? I remember the Democratic Party National Convention. I don't remember what city, but I was there with Alan when they made the infamous statement, government is the only thing that we all belong to. That's unbelievable. That's what they believed in the Democratic Party. I think this was in 2012. So I don't accept that any man who thinks, what will the government do for me, is not thinking masculine thoughts. That's the irony. That's as unmasculine as you can get.
You know, our friend Rod Dreher has been writing a very interesting Substack blog. And one of the recent blogs he wrote about was how he's been reading about Weimar Germany in the 1920s and the sentiment that young men, middle class, had during that time. Frustration with the government, frustration with the media, frustration in general. Obviously, there was no God in many of those communities. And what Dreher says is that when he visits here in the United States, he's living in Hungary, but he's an American, for those who don't know. When he comes and visits here now in the U.S. occasionally, he's starting to think about Weimar 1920s.
Oh, I think the analogy is apt. But the thought that we have a generation as angry and frustrated as the Weimar Germans, young generation, is really sad. They had a lot to be resentful about. Where to buy a loaf of bread, you needed a wheelbarrow filled with cash. The analogy just fails. They had just lost a war where so many of them have died and so many of them are egregiously wounded. They come back to a Germany where they didn't believe that they really lost the war, that they were sabotaged by internal domestic enemies. We didn't have that. We don't have any of that here. They're in the freest country on earth, in many ways the best of any large countries, and they're acting like they're in the Weimar Republic. It's not objectively accurate. I'm not saying he's wrong. He's right because subjectively, it is the Weimar Republic. Objectively, it has virtually nothing in common with it. They don't need a wheelbarrow of cash to get a loaf of bread. They have not just lost a war of such magnitude.
I think that they would say that it's not the same, but they do feel like they've been sabotaged from within. They've been locked up because of the COVID lockdowns. They have been lied to about having to vaccinate. They have been lied to that if they go to college, they'll be given the promise of a job, but then they graduate from college with lots of debt and no job. They say that it is virtually impossible for them to get jobs because so many of the opportunities are given to foreigners. And so they'll say it's not the same as the 1920s in Germany, but they do feel disaffected because they've been lied to time and time again from within.
All right, so they have been lied to. The first two are accurate. And I said it at the time. They were lied to about COVID. And the number of lies is unbelievable. The distance of 6 feet, the masks, the vaccine that is not actually a vaccine, that it was experimental, etc. So the answer is not anger alone. It must be, now I will fight. That's how you get undisaffected. You fight.
Fight for what?
Fight for a government that has a CDC that tells the truth. That I'm just talking about this example. Fighting, and nonviolent is what I mean. Fighting is the answer to being lied to. Fight for the truth.
Well, I think if you spend time on social media, you see that that is what they're doing. They're fighting against the current administration, but they're still fighting. I don't know what they're fully fighting for, but they're certainly fighting. It's tear it all down. Tear it all down and burn it because it's stacked against us.
Tear it all out and burn it is what the French Revolution was about. That was not what the American Revolution was about. Americans have always been grateful to Great Britain for its values and so much else. The French Revolution was burn it all down. So they burned churches, they burned priests, and look at what it ended up with, the guillotine. And we ended up with the Liberty Bell. And on the Liberty Bell, as I have pointed out for decades, is only one inscription other than the company that made the bell. And it was from Leviticus chapter 25. You shall proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. Ukaratem dror b'chol haaretz b'chol yoshveh. I rarely invoke the Hebrew because very few people are familiar with it. But I want them to know how authentic the translation was. That shows, by the way, there are so many issues, Marissa. That shows why the term Judeo-Christian is completely valid. And there is a movement in Christianity today to drop the Judeo. If there's no Judeo, there is no Christian. As I remind my very large number of Christian followers, Jesus never read the New Testament. He only read the Old Testament. He was an observant Jew. The De-Judaization of Jesus is always the predecessor to totalitarianism. It's a very bad movement. So that verse shows how familiar the founders were with the Judeo. That's a statement from the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible.
Dennis, can you explain the connection between separating Jesus from Judaism and totalitarianism?
Yeah, well, I think it began, I may be wrong, it may have been earlier, But I know that it was a major feature of the Nazis to de-Judaize Jesus, and for that matter, the Bible. And they said Jesus was not a Jew, Jesus was an Aryan. An Aryan. And now you have Jesus was not a Jew, he was a Palestinian. If you'd have said to Jesus, "Are you a Palestinian?" he would have said, "Excuse me, what?" The term was not even known. The Hebrew, plishtim, sounds like Palestinian, but they were considered vanquished and gone from history when Israel entered Canaan. He was crucified by the Romans as the King of the Jews. That was the term. His entire mission was to the Jews. So the one example we had was the Nazi example, and that led to Nazi totalitarianism. And now we have the Hamas rule was Palestinian totalitarianism. They subjected their people to complete control. You differed with them, they killed you. They even suspected you differed with them. You know how many people they took out and just shot in the streets for others to feel terror of differing with Hamas? The only examples we have of the de-Judaization of Jesus have been totalitarian models. First the Nazi, and now the Islamic.
How do you think the de-Judaization of Jesus would impact America?
Well, there's no question. It would lead to something really bad. You know, I used to meaning before a year and 2 months ago. All of my life, I would say, because I spoke to so many Christian groups, and I would remind them that of the famous verse, in Genesis, I will bless those who bless you, meaning the followers of Abraham, the seed of Abraham, and curse those who curse you. And I would remind them, America has been the most blessed country in the world, and it has also been the greatest supporter of Israel in the world. And I would always add, and should the day come that America stops support of Israel and the Jewish people, which is essentially the same thing, so too will America's fortunes.
You think the Old Testament, when God references Israel, God means the modern state of Israel led by Bibi Netanyahu?
Well, I don't know if God chooses prime ministers. I think he leaves that in human hands. He has given us free will. But yes, it means Israel. Remember, and this is critically important, again, a point I've made for decades, what a credit it is to Jews that Israel, the Jewish people, that's the term for the Jewish people, is so often criticized in the Jewish Bible, the Hebrew Bible. There is no other example in any religion's Bibles of self-criticism let alone self-criticism on such a scale. That's a big deal. Instead of saying, look at how awful Israel was, which is correct, but there's also, look at how great Israel was, that it kept all of Israel's flaws, all of its sins, all of God's criticisms in their own Bible. That's magnificent. That's what matters.
What would you say to somebody who is not religious or maybe not quite sure how to read the Bible or glean from the Bible what is true and what is false about the United States relationship with Israel and the United States relationship with the Jewish people?
Well, I never make any of my arguments based on faith. That's why I call my commentary on each of the 5 books of the Torah the rational Bible. How can you make an argument on faith to bring people to faith? It doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
You make reasoned arguments. The biggest reason to support Israel is not a faith argument. It's a moral argument. And it's one I gave in my original video explaining the Middle Eastern conflict for PragerU, which stands the test of time. And I asked one simple question. What would happen if Israel decided, you know what, we're going to stop fighting. We're relinquishing all our weapons and we will not fight. On the other hand, what would happen if the Palestinians said, we will not fight, here are all our weapons? Okay, so what would happen? In the case of the Palestinians relinquishing violence and war and terror and giving up their weapons, there would be peace the next day. If Israel did that, there would be literal genocide. The Israeli Jewish population would be largely wiped out, and vast numbers of its women would also be raped. By the way, just on a sidebar, I've always been in tune with human suffering. I've written about it and spoken about it a lot. But in this condition, especially when I'm just thinking, which is often the case, I have been more attuned to the horror of rape than ever before. I don't know why. Maybe it was October 7th, and what I read was done to women. But violent rape in particular has to be an unbelievable trauma to a woman. So my hatred of rape has increased exponentially. But it's so often used. It doesn't mean much to a lot of people. Because it is so ubiquitous. What the Russian soldiers did to God knows how many German women. That was the common thread in most wars, that the victors raped the women of the vanquished. If I'm asked to isolate one verse in the Torah, the first 5 books, that convinces me that God is the author? It's the one in Deuteronomy where if you want a woman from among the nations that you vanquish, before you can touch her, you have to give her 30 days to mourn her losses of her family and friends. You can't touch her. And then you can only touch her if you will marry her. Men don't write such a thing, certainly not in the late Bronze Age. This is a divine injunction. And that ended Jewish rape of vanquished women 3,000 years ago. You never hear of Israeli soldiers raping Palestinian women. So I go back to my original issue. What would happen if Israel laid down its arms? The wiping out of most or all of the Jews of Israel? What would happen if the Palestinians laid down their arms? Peace the next day.
You talk about the raping of women during wars in many ways is a way to break the spirit of a society. I mean, I think also about the human trafficking that is happening even in America. But certainly it has been a tool that Soviets have used and Islam uses, and the world is all up in arms claiming that they care about morality and ethics, and people don't even talk about how women have been treated. But it does take me back to the bizarre alliance between the Marxists and the Islamists, that red-green alliance that has been more prevalent in the West. I mean, Europe has basically almost disappeared. And it is not just the Jews who have suffered from this Marxist-Islamic alliance. Lebanon is unrecognizable, and Iran and many other countries. And now it feels like here in America, we're under attack with this green-red alliance.
So let me address this very widely believed idea that the rape of women in war is done to demoralize the enemy. Now, I don't know whether it does demoralize. I know in the case of Israel, it emboldened them. So many Israelis who were prosperous in the West flew right back to Israel to fight for it. But my belief, knowing male nature, having described this for decades, is that in war, when you're victorious, the moral guardrails, illegal guardrails against rape are dropped. You can get away with taking women sexually. And most men, not all by any means, will use that opportunity to have their way with women that they could never have with the normal guardrails that societies do. I don't think that Soviet/Russian soldiers who raped hundreds of thousands of German women were thinking, I'm doing this for the Soviet Union to demoralize the German people. They're thinking I'm doing it because I can get away with it. That's why I'm writing, or I've written, my next book coming out February 24, 2026. If there is no God, the battle over who defines good and evil. That's the key battle. And if there is no God, there is no good and evil. They were just opinions about good and evil. So I don't buy that argument. At first, it doesn't demoralize. It often emboldens. And second, that's not why they're doing it. They're doing it because they can get away with it.
Why do you think there's this strange alliance between the Marxists and the leftists and the Islamists?
Well, I want to give David Horowitz credit for bringing this to my attention. I believe in the 1990s. And he said, what is happening now is watermelons. Green on the outside, red on the inside. Green is the environmentalist crowd, and red is communism and socialism. And he was right. The second he said it to me, I knew he was right. But he brought it to my attention, and I want to give him credit for it. He was a prophetic voice, I should say has been a prophetic voice about the left. Saying,
it was a huge loss losing him this year. David Horowitz.
That's right.
Another big loss.
Another big loss.
You know, I don't know if you know this, but on social media, the emoji and the icon of a watermelon is a pro-Hamas symbol. So if you walk around streets of San Francisco, you'll see people put on their windows not just the LGBTQIA rainbow flag, but you'll oftentimes see a little picture of a watermelon. There are kindergarten classes and first grade classrooms all over the United States, but I've seen some of them in San Francisco where the kids are asked to draw watermelons as a resistance, free Palestine resistance. So it's interesting that you bring up the watermelon and what the watermelon has symbolized here in the West.
They are having kids draw watermelons. In other words, support for Hamas. I don't know of any instance, and this is what I argued at the Oxford University, a debate that they invited me to participate in. People could see it on YouTube. That is Prager at the Oxford Union. And I argued, was there any other example in history of the belief that the totalitarians wanted peace and the free country wanted war? It's one of the enormous lies told about Israel. That is unprecedented. What free country wants its husbands and fathers and brothers to risk death and too often actually die rather than peace? Only Israel. There's a uniqueness to Jew hatred that doesn't exist elsewhere. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, means we destroy Israel. What else is there between the river and the sea? Israel. There is no other example of a country targeted for extinction. But this is not new. In the Passover Haggadah, the liturgy for the Passover Seder, there is a line, in every generation they arise to annihilate us, not to persecute us, not to enslave us, to annihilate us. It's a term almost never used in Old or New Hebrew, lechalotenu, to make an end of us.
And the UK is in danger. It's completely losing its identity.
The Western civilization is not fighting back. It's surrendering. The Jews have the audacity of fighting back. And this ticks off the rest of the West. That this little state of 9 million, or is it 11 million with 9 million Jews? By the way, 2 million Arabs. The lie of Israeli apartheid and racism and so on. 2 million Arabs can live in Israel and pretty much love it. That's why they don't move. No Jews can live, not one, in the West Bank or Gaza.
You know, you mentioned that the West isn't fighting back. And I think that in America, you know, we elected Donald Trump, and I know that you were supportive of him because we want to fight back. And we felt like he is going to fight for us, for the United States. And I mean, he's been in office for about a year. I'll let you remark on how you think he is doing. But I do think we're trying to fight back. Are we fighting hard enough? I don't know.
Well, the U.S. is alone in the West in the fighting. Yes, that's true. And there's a big battle in America over whether we should at all.
Yes.
You have major voices like Candace and Tucker who don't think we should fight at all. And they represent a lot of people, including mostly young people, which is very scary.
Why do you think young people are so drawn to this narrative that they bring of isolationism or not fighting back?
They have been taught that America first means America only. That's one reason. Another is they don't get their meaning in life, which every human needs badly. Everyone would agree to that. Without a sense of purpose, they can't feel fulfilled or happy. So they got to get it from something. They used to get it from God, country, and family. They got no God, a secular education, a secular society. They got no country. The only thing they really remember about Thomas Jefferson is that he had slaves. That was removed. And family, the thought that they'll get meaning from marriage and children has been wiped away as well. When I was in high school, I had a very strong sense of purpose with regard to God and country. But I also had a tremendous inner peace and happiness from the prospect of being a husband, father. I knew more than anything, I wanted children. I wanted to be a dad.
Dennis, how do we handle people in our tent who we love, friends of ours, who are saying things that are hurting our country, hurting the world?
That's a very big question. How do we handle? First, you have to ask, what do you think internally? Not what do you say, what do you think? And here is what is clear. Whether or not it emanates from antisemitism is secondary. To what effect does Candace saying in her long interview or dialogue with Tucker Carlson that Israel is the demonic state? I mean, that's incredible.
That she says that.
She said it. Does she hate only Israel? Does she hate Sudan? Does she hate North Korea? Does she hate the Chinese Communist Party? I'm very curious to know. But everything goes back to Israel.
Why do you think they're doing this, Dennis? People ask me all the time. These are people you know, people I know.
Why are they doing what?
Spreading misinformation about us, about the Jewish people, about Israel, about the president, about Turning Point, about Rob and Mikey McCoy. Why are people doing this?
It's very painful to me when people like Rob McCoy are smeared. It's hard to imagine anybody I've met who is a more decent human being. And it's true about all or nearly all the good people. The existence of good people, especially good people with whom the left differs, is a terrible challenge or rebuke of the left. Look at what we with conservative Judeo-Christian principles produce. Do you produce such people? In every test, examination of the issue, it was found that conservatives devote more time and give more money to the less fortunate than people on the left do. So on the left, you don't ask, how can we produce better people? It's how can we tear down the good people of the right? That's what they do.
Dennis, many of our friends have been calling me and wondering what they should do about our mutual friends, conservatives with large platforms, who are saying things that are harmful. They're saying things that are harmful to the Jewish people, but they're also saying things that are harmful to America. And the dilemma is they're their friends and they don't want to betray them. They feel loyal to them and they don't know what to do. What should we do about that?
It's a real dilemma, but the answer, to my mind, is pretty clear. This is where values come into the picture. Is loyalty to friends more important than your values? Loyalty to friends is not the highest value. Loyalty to one's values is a higher value. If you will, if you're religious, loyalty to God, loyalty to the Bible. They're higher values. What if your wonderful friend defended slavery? What are you supposed to do? Not in agreement, but in sympathy with your friend and his views by extrapolation. It's a very terrible dilemma. It happens between fathers and sons. You don't have to attack the character of your friend, and you may even say, I've always considered so-and-so a wonderful person. But on this issue, he is not wonderful.
So I think some of them are saying, well, do I really have to make a remark on every issue? I agree with my friend on most things, and some issues I'm just not going to remark about. Why do I have to get involved?
It depends how important you think that issue is. America is worthy of your support. It's the greatest experiment in human liberty ever devised. That's worthy of your support. The Jews are worthy of your support because there is such a thing as Judeo-Christian. If there's no Judeo, there's no Christian. And many Christians are aware of this. When Tucker Carlson said, for which he later apologized, but the issue is not apology. The issue is not that he hurt people's feelings. It's that it betrayed his real animosity. The people he most dislikes on earth are Christian Zionists, which there were far more than Jewish Zionists. Look at all the places in America named Zion, because Zion is mentioned, 60-something times in the Hebrew Bible as Israel. And the famous prayer, I think it's from Isaiah, that from Zion shall go forth the Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem. This is what has been known as Zionism. This use of the term Zionists as a term of opprobrium is unbelievable. A Zionist is one who believes that the Jews have a right to a state which they've called Israel. That's all it means. Removing Zionism, separating it from Judaism, would be like separating the Son, S-O-N, from the Christian Trinity. Oh, I believe in Christianity, but not in the Son. Then that's fine, but you're not a Christian then.
You mentioned that the attack on America, and that America is worth fighting for, and if you're true to your values, even if your friends are your close friends, you have to be first loyal to your values before you're loyal to your friends. In what ways do you feel like the right, not the left, because we know that we're used to the left attacking America, but in what way is the right attacking America? Or I should say, in what way are some on the right attacking America?
So in 2024, I wrote a column well before the recent outbursts against Israel. So it had nothing to do with Israel. It was all about America. When Tucker Carlson said, and I gave the exact quote, that in essence, anyone who defends the dropping of the atom bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki is evil. Those are his terms. Just defending it is evil because civilians were killed in the hundreds of thousands. So, of course, I would love to ask him, but we are certain, it's not conjecture, over the more than 1 million civilians who would have died if we had done a land invasion. And not to mention the number of Allied soldiers who would have been killed. But he doesn't address that argument. And I know what he would say. I think Tucker would say, we targeted this many civilians. And that is always wrong. But if the killing of civilians is always wrong, you cannot wage a war against evil regimes. You've lost the war. There's no such thing. It's part of the tragedy of war that civilians will be killed.
How isn't it? Well, I mean, we've condemned different acts within American history before, and we're not considered anti-American. I mean, we have to be able to say when America has done something wrong. And so how is condemning America for dropping the bomb and Hiroshima an attack on America specifically? I mean, maybe that's just his opinion.
No. Jim Crow laws were immoral. That's an attack on Jim Crow laws, an attack on much of the South. That's true. But on Hiroshima, that means that nearly all Americans were evil. That's an attack on America. When you say anyone who supported the dropping of the atom bombs was moral is an evil person. I mean, that if you regard the great majority of Americans as evil is quite different from just saying Jim Crow laws were wrong.
I want to move on to the Red-Green Alliance. When David Horowitz talked about the Red-Green Alliance, as you mentioned earlier, he talked about the alliance between the Marxists and the Green Party, the environmentalists. Now the Red-Green Alliance has become a combination of the Marxists, which oftentimes are leftists in America, right? The LGBTQA+, and the Islamists, the pro-Hamas Free Palestine movement. So you're now seeing pro-Hamas, LGBTQA+, uniting this new watermelon, this new Red-Green Alliance. Incidentally, both really anti-freedom and not quite tolerant. Can you make some remarks on this bizarre combination and how this evolved into a combination between leftists and Islamofascists in the West?
The notion that the enemy of my enemy is my friend is true on both sides. Stalin was the enemy of Hitler. We were the enemy of Hitler. We had no use for the Stalinist regime in the Soviet Union, but we allied with them to defeat that time's greater evil, Nazism. And now they're doing it on their side. The West is our enemy. That's true for the left. And it is true for the Islamists. So they unite. They have nothing else, or very little else in common. And they are united. The hatred of America, hatred of Western civilization, the colonizer, oppressive West, is true for both of them. And they each think they will devour the other once the West is defeated. But I would put my money on the Islamists.
You think the Islamists
Would win.
Why do you think the Islamists will win?
They're more ruthless. The communists kill you in great numbers, but they don't cut your head off. People fear terror and pain more than they fear death.
You think Islamist fascism, this Islamofascism, is the greatest threat to Western civilization? Is it the greatest threat to America?
Well, it's the greatest threat to the West generally, and therefore to America. I mean, look at Great Britain. London is unrecognizable. I studied in England in the 1970s. It was England. Today, what do they call it? Londonistan? It's astonishing to me. Muslims would take over the central square in any given British city for outdoor prayers. Protestants never did that when they were dominant. Catholics never did that in Catholic cities like New Orleans. Jews never did that. This is unique to a large segment of the Muslim populations in the West. So yeah, I think it's the greater threat because it also offers people, theoretically, God by the name of Allah, and communism doesn't. And people want, quote unquote, spirituality.
I know that when Charlie was visiting you at the hospital, you would talk about all sorts of things, ethical monotheism. And I know that he was very concerned about radical Islam. Did you ever talk to Charlie about the threat of radical Islam?
I don't think we did, interestingly enough.
Well, he definitely picked up on it. What
yeah,
did
well,
you
he
talk
picked up on it from my broadcasts, which he listened to every day.
Well, and probably from seeing the actual threats. Charlie had the ability to see what's coming our way. So what did you talk to Charlie about? I know he dedicated his book to you. And
read the dedication.
Yeah.
Show people his book.
So it just came out, Stop in the Name of God. It's about the Sabbath.
By the way, this was sent to me by Erica.
Didn't Erica came here?
Who came here. That's right. I was very touched.
This book is dedicated to Dennis Prager. Your life's work brought me to honoring the Sabbath. As a result, I wrote this book. Thank you, Dennis, for all you have done for humanity. God bless you.
That's something?
Yeah.
I was very moved by that. People to be aware.
I mean, he would spend hours with you and you would talk.
Well, what happened frequently was he would call me after hearing me say something on either my radio show or, one of my fireside chats for PragerU, and then ask me about it. And this is not by way of bragging. This is exactly what Charlie would say, that I was a mentor of his. He would just ask me to amplify on some statement that he had heard me make. It was a very common theme of our talks.
Did Charlie ever talk to you about what I think is a massive issue, and that is young men and young women are not dating and they're not getting married?
Yeah, I mean, we had identical views. This is a tragedy. Women have their reasons and men have their reasons. People could have given these reasons 100 years ago, but they didn't. when I grew up, I was a teenager in the 60s. And when I grew up, it was a given I'll get married. I never debated, do I want my space? Do I want to pursue a career only? I was sure as anything I was sure of that I would one day get married.
Did you feel like you needed to be financially stable before
No, it
you
didn't
proposed?
occur to me. It literally never occurred to me. My parents got married when they were 21. And my mother was 20. Now that I think about it. And my father was hardly financially stable at the age of 21. But that's when they got married. Why do you have to be financially in excellent condition before you marry? Why don't you marry and then get into excellent financial condition? Which what most often happens anyway. It's unbelievable to me. Aren't you going to save money just by being married and having one rent rather than two rental expenses? There's so much non-wisdom that pervades America, and especially its young. And that's one of them. You know when you'll be ready to get married? On the day you marry. Nobody's ready. What does ready mean even? I don't understand the term. What is ready? Certainly in Jewish life, it's a non-issue. How do you even say ready in Hebrew? I'm serious.
Muhan?
If you would say to an Israeli, Haim ata muchan להתנשא, are you ready to get married? You go, מה פתאום? What's going on here? I don't understand the question. It's right, it's never used.
I think it ties into the conversation we had about the disaffected men. And they're disaffected because, again, they're focused on maybe the government solving their problems. Maybe they're not getting married because they think that they're not financially stable enough to get married, but then they don't have the most meaningful thing, their purpose in their life, and that is to be a father, to be a husband, to protect a little nuclear miracle that they can create for themselves and they can have some autonomy over. And then you have women who are lonely and upset, and many of them, I know at least 200 beautiful single women. Believe me, I do. Many of them work for us at PragerU. And there just seems to be this disconnect between young men and young women. Either the men are absent, or they're online, or the women are uninterested and they're hoping to find Prince Charming who is wealthy, perfect, handsome, and set to deliver all your needs on the first day that you meet them. I don't know what it is. It's the man's fault, the women's fault, the culture's fault, whatever it is. I just see the consequence. The consequence is we're below replacement rate. People are not having children. People are lonely. They're becoming disaffected. And there is a lot of despair, and therefore they're looking for the outside to blame and tear it all down. I think a lot of this anger that we're seeing, this darkness that we're seeing in our society, all comes down to the fact that young people don't know how to really connect and build meaning together. And so what do we tell them to do? How do we give them the wisdom and the guidance to take their lives into their own hands?
It's so unique in history. There's no society we know of that has had to persuade its young people to get married and make a family. That was the virtually universal desire. But it turns out that without religion as its base from which it gathers its values, turns out that that sort of ends the need to get married and have children. That the old song, love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage, is not accurate. It was true at that time, but it was true because society wanted it to be true. They didn't realize it. I didn't realize it. I thought that was accurate. And it turns out, like virtually everything else, it's a choice. And we haven't made the argument of why they should choose it. I don't understand the argument that I want to choose not to marry or choose not to have children. I don't understand it. Two of the richest things you can have in life, what are they going to be substituted for? Career? Careers end. But your children, unless God forbid they die, go on forever, well, at least beyond your life. Your marriage goes until one of you dies. Career doesn't, especially with people living longer and longer. Your dogs die quite often in the course of your lifetime. It's a very odd proposition to make. It's that people know the sacrifices that marriage and children entail, but not the benefits. It curbs your freedom. Of course it'll curb your freedom. Okay. I'm big on individual freedom, but I deeply wanted children. Every choice means a sacrifice of something. That is the nature of choices. There's no choice you make that is only advantages and no disadvantages. When you buy something, you are sacrificing some money. All right, that's correct. But if that's all you think about, you won't buy anything. You believe that what you're buying is worth the sacrifice of your money to obtain it. That's how you should ask about everything. What does it cost to get this item? What does it cost to get married? What does it cost to have children? Versus, what price do I pay if I don't get married and if I don't have children?
Yeah, people don't want to sacrifice, and they keep thinking that the next best thing is going to happen, and nobody ever thinks that something bad could happen to them. I mean, you talk about career. I mean, you had a massive career, and here you are now, and the thing that brings you most happiness, as you continuously share with us, is your family, your children, and your wife. Can you imagine being in this situation without your family? Would your career and all the
Right.
books that you've written and all the fame and all the people that love you from around the world, would that be enough for you?
No. And you have to add friends.
Real relationships.
Yeah. I can't imagine without family. And I can't imagine without my friends. Because I don't want to depend on my children for my happiness. I've talked about that a lot in my happiness book and my happiness hour on my radio show.
I know that a few weeks ago you were reading about the portion in later Genesis, Vayeshlach, where Jacob was wrestling with the angel. And you had some really interesting wisdom that I haven't heard from you yet.
That's when Jacob's name is changed by God to Israel. And he is forever known as the Jews are as Israel. And the Torah itself, Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah itself gives the divine explanation of the name change. Yisrael, or Israel, means struggle with God. But that's not the only thing God says to Jacob. You have struggled with God, and you have struggled with man. Nobody quotes that part. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I remember studying it as just wrestling with God and
That's
struggling with accepting why God allows bad things to happen
Right.
or whether God exists, and it being a normal thing to wrestle with your faith. So what's the component of wrestling with man?
Well, it's many issues. First is wrestling with man's nature, which is not good. It's not necessarily bad, but it's not good. And that's a big divide between secular humanism and biblical monotheism. The Bible, for both Jews and Christians, is unequivocal about human nature. You have to battle it. Your own individual nature and or human nature to be a good person. So that's the battle with human nature. But there's the battle with your own nature. Some people are born better than others. We see it in our children.
Yeah.
Some come out and are always kind. And some come out and they're much more selfish than they are altruistic. So depending on your nature, you may have to do more battling. But it's a battle. So that's what's meant. You have struggled with God and with man. It also means that when your fellow human beings have gone really bad, you have to fight them. Bonhoeffer, the German pastor who defended the Jews and other victims of Nazism and was executed shortly before World War II ended, executed by the Nazis. He battled man, not his human nature. He might have done that too, I don't know. But he battled man. All good, as I have so often said, comes from outliers. Not all outliers do good, but all good is done by outliers. People who differ with the majority.
Eric Metaxas wrote a book about Bonhoeffer,
That's
which
right.
then turned into a movie through Angel Studios. It's
That's right.
really an important movie for especially for teenagers, I think, to watch. It's a hard movie to watch, but I think
Eric has been a great voice.
Yeah, he's an outlier.
That's right.
In the best way possible. And we're very lucky at PragerU. I mean, so many of those outliers have come to us, have come to you, and
right.
We have I say a collection of gems at PragerU.
That's
a real
good.
collection of gems.
We could be Outlier U.
OutlierU.com. That's
Right.
right. 2025 was a very interesting year, to say the least. There were really bad things that happened, but there are also amazing things that happened. I would say even miracles that I think would be unfair if we don't notice them.
That's so right. Far more good has happened in 2025, in large measure, than bad has happened. One specific American example is we've gone from millions of illegal immigrants to zero, almost overnight, thanks to President Donald Trump. That's a big deal. Not because illegal immigrants are theoretically of a different race. Nobody gives a hoot. And nobody thinks of race when they think of illegal immigrants. They think not of foreign race, but foreign values. I warned about that in a column when Angela Merkel was a truly foolish leader, opened the gates of Europe to millions of Muslim immigrants. And I said, they're bringing in their values, not just their bodies. That wasn't obvious to the leaders of the West is contributing to the disappearance of London and gradually the UK. It's contributing to the fact that Sweden, for much of its history, the country with nearly or exactly the least amount of violent crime, let alone rape. Stockholm is known as the rape capital of Europe because of the vast number of people from Muslim countries. But you can't say that. You're called Islamophobic.
How lucky we are to be living in the United States of America.
Well, that's
How
right.
lucky we are.
We have fought back. Great Britain did not.
And by the way, that alone is a miracle, having the courage to
That's
fight
right. Well,
back.
You could thank Donald Trump in large measure. But the country elected him, not just the electoral vote, the popular vote.
Well, and then fighting DEI on college campuses.
That's right.
Shrinking the Department of Education. I'm sure you've been following what Linda McMahon has been doing as Secretary of Education. PragerU in 11 states where our content is in schools, in government schools. There are so many amazing miracles. And Dennis, the religious revival that we're saying, people are going back to church. That's what Charlie Kirk has been praying for years.
Right. That's correct. All of that is absolutely accurate. On the Department of Education, every barometer of education excellence has fallen since the Department of Education was created. By the way, the young woman that I did the Dennis and Julie podcast with was named a senior advisor
Yeah.
for the Department of Education. I'm very proud of that, as of course she should be.
And then there is a huge decline in gender-affirming care, the chemical castration and surgical castration of children, which is one of the
That's right.
greatest evils, I think, of maybe modern society and maybe all time, to do what they've been doing to children. That is in rapid decline because parents are starting to
That's right.
hear about how horrible that is.
Well,
That is a miracle, even if that alone, if that was the only thing that happened, Dennis, in 2025, that less children are falling into gender-affirming care and getting castrated. If that alone, if just saving children alone on that front was the only thing, then I would say 2025 was a miracle.
well, that's a great point. It's unbelievable. It emanates from the grandest lie that a man can become a woman or a woman a man. It cannot happen. You can delude yourself into thinking that, but you're not. Neither your mind, and a male mind is very different from a female mind, nor your instincts or your biology. I mean, you can castrate, you can remove breasts. It doesn't do anything. It's cosmetic. It's not qualitative.
Yeah, it's a spiritual battle. 2025, for those of us who are aware, we've seen miracles and we've seen really hard times.
Well, we have seen miracles. Look at what happened in the Middle East. Israel had to fight 7 countries, all of which have vowed to exterminate it. Not win a war, exterminate Israel and its Jewish population. And they were all defeated. That's in the realm of the miraculous. So you're very right. People should be celebrating the achievements of this past year.
I guess we can be fair to 2025
That's
in
right.
retrospect.
Correct.
So my son just turned 13, and as you know, in the Jewish faith, we celebrate his bar mitzvah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of wrestling with this idea that he's now considered a man. When you did the FaceTime with him, you said, you know, you're now a man. Your sins belong to you. Your parents are no longer responsible for your sins. You are now a man. And you know, I started thinking about this concept of manhood when a child is 13, because from my perspective, he's a little boy. He's small. He's only 13 years old. And it actually hit me the other day, this concept of why does the Torah say that you're a man at age 13, where you cannot drive, you cannot drink, you're not really on your own. 13-year-olds in modern day America live with their parents and will be living with their parents for many more years. Why are they considered men in the eyes of God when they're only 13 years old? And I'm curious, how do you think this ancient tradition applies to modern day times? A 13-year-old is a man?
Well, let me just make one little correction. The Torah does not speak about bar mitzvah. This is post-Torah Judaism.
So the rabbis.
It's ancient, but it's rabbinic. It's a great institution. Why did they choose 13? I don't know. As opposed to 14. I mean, whatever age is chosen, we could ask the same question.
Does it have to do with puberty?
Presumably. I think it's great. I think at 13 you're old enough to understand you can no longer blame your parents for bad things you do. It's up to you. It's a great teaching, arguably even greater today than in the past, when at 13, some people became kings of their countries. We have prolonged childhood with the term adolescence. I'm not sure that existed in the 19th century, let alone earlier. At 13, you should know shoplifting is wrong. Okay? And if you do shoplift, you can't blame your parents, let alone murder or any of the other violations of the Ten Commandments. It's a great teaching.
I mean, can you blame the parents if they don't teach their children right from wrong?
Yeah, I do blame parents. But that's beside the point.
Maybe it's a reminder for parents that by age 13,
That's right.
they better teach their children right from wrong and not focus on all the other things that parents are focused on.
Honor your mother and father, your father and mother to be precise, in the Ten Commandments. And that's not about how you feel about it. It's what you do.
You know, so many 13-year-olds sit with their families and start thinking about where they're going to end up going to college instead of thinking about what kind of person they're going to be.
Well, I am proud to say it's one of my rare moments of self-compliment. I constantly told my two boys, who are almost 10 years apart, I don't care what college you get into. I don't care about your grades. I don't care if you go to college. I care only about your character. And it was a very good thing to say to them.
And I think that as a parent, whether you're a Jew, a Christian, believe in whatever you believe in, if you don't teach your children those values by the time they're 13 years old, by the time the hormones kick in,
it may be too late.
And it may be too late.
That's a good point.
And that is why I think 13 is such an important time for a man to celebrate manhood, because they have up until 13 to build their character and lay the groundwork for the foundational values that they need to know in order to inoculate themselves against the populist, the pressure, society, their entrance into high school and then maybe college. You have the chance to do it by the time they're 13. And it's just going to get harder as a parent to do it if you wait.
You should write a book about this. I'm not kidding. And you're laughing because you're thinking about it.
I'm laughing because you're funny.
Okay, that's good.
And wise.
Uh-huh.
What do you think about hairspray? Should it be abolished?
Oh, that's a riot. I don't know. For some women it works. When I hear the word hairspray, I recoil like Dracula from the cross.
Well, let's see how many people agree with us on the hairspray comment.
All right.
Thank you, Dennis. It's great sitting with you. Looking forward to doing this again.
You're a joy.